Welcome to Filmability. My name's Joel Fisher and I'm the author of Filmability, A History of Sustainability in Cinema, which you can find on Amazon and Kindle paperback. Welcome if this is your first time listening, and welcome back if you've listened before. Remember, you can find me wherever you get your podcasts, so remember to like, share, subscribe, comment and all that good stuff. This week I'll be talking about Hush, a horror movie in 2016 about a deaf author who gets tormented by a serial killer. It's directed by Mike Flanagan, a director who's built a following over the years, having previously directed Oculus, and since then has had great success with Netflix shows such as Haunting of House Hill, Midnight Mass, The Fall of the House of Usher, and Stephen King's film Gerald Game. And also, theatrically, he has films such as Doctor Sleep and The Life of Chuck, which are both Stephen King adaptations. It's co-written by Kate Siegel, and was conceived on a date that they had in 2014, and since then they've gone on to get married and have worked together many times. As usual, if you'd like to watch Hush, then I suggest you do so now before continuing with the podcast, because I will be spoiling everything. At time of recording, you can find Hush on Plex for free with adverts, and with a subscription on Shudder and Shout TV. Also, I should perhaps let you know that Hush has a black and white version called the Shush Cut. So if you aren't keen on watching a black and white movie, then make sure you watch the right version that you'd like to watch. It never bothers me personally, but there are some people who are a bit funny about that kind of thing. So anyway, without further ado, let's get on with the film. Okay, so the film starts out with the camera moving down through the trees to an isolated house. You could say, cabin in the woods, perhaps. A woman is at home chopping vegetables, following a recipe that she's found online. This woman's name is Maddie and she's played by Kate Siegel. The sound dulls as we see her concentrating on the instructions as she tastes the meal, not looking satisfied with it. She gets a message from a friend asking if she can drop by, and she notices that the battery is nearly dead on her laptop. She switches to her phone and sends a message to her friend, and she goes to the door and shakes the cat food bowl, and her cat comes in and her friend comes along as well. Her friend's name is Sarah and she's played by Samantha Sloyan. She tells Maddie that she's read her book, putting it down and signing what she just said because Maddie is deaf. And she says that she knows she doesn't have to sign as Sarah puts down the book. Sarah then asks how she does it, and Maddie says that it's her voice in her mind telling her all the different possibilities, like a movie, like she can see every single possibility of what could happen. And as the last voice that she heard was her mother's before she went deaf, and that is the voice that she has in her head. Sarah then tells her that she is a good storyteller, but signs the word "kiss it" instead, and they laugh. A very loud fire alarm goes off suddenly, along with flashing lights as Maddie rushes back into the kitchen and takes the food out of the oven. She explains to Sarah that as she can't hear the alarm, it's loud enough to cause vibrations, so it would wake her up in the middle of the night. They talk a bit more, and Sarah thanks Maddie for the book, to which she says she can keep it because she has dozens of copies. Maddie then goes back inside, and the camera focuses on a book cover saying that she had bacterial meningitis when she was 13 and lost her hearing. She settled down on her couch to keep writing on her laptop, and her mother's voice plays in her head, talking about all the different things she could be writing about. She calls a man called Craig, but hangs up. However, Craig calls back, and she shuts her laptop. But it goes to her phone, and she gets up and turns it off. She goes back into the kitchen to clear up, and there's a bang on the door. She can't hear it, but the audience can. Suddenly there's a louder bang, and Sarah is at the door, pleading Maddie for help. Then a masked man appears behind her and stabs her several times in the back, and then turns around and stabs her in the front. He looks through the window trying to figure out why she hasn't seen him. He knocks on the glass on the door, and she doesn't respond. And this is a point that I think I should bring up. Although I will give this little oversight a pass this time, but usually deaf people are more aware of their surroundings because they can't hear. So, therefore, having the man outside stabbing Maddie's friend to death, looking at her through the window and standing behind her as she uses her laptop may alert Maddie to at least the feeling that she may be being watched. Have you ever had the feeling that somebody was watching you? We all have this perception that we may be being watched, even when we're not. Some say it's a primal instinct that keeps us alive. The awareness of the possibility of the danger and the instinct for survival is in all of us, and that's no different for deaf people. As I say, a deaf person may even be more aware that somebody could be behind them because they have to rely on their other senses. But let's not let reality get in the way of a good story. This man is only known as the Man in the credits, but he's played by John Gallagher Jr. Inside, Maddie's phone rings again and she sits down on the couch, opening her laptop as the phone stops. The man comes inside, standing behind her, and makes noises to test if she can hear him. She gets a call and the man moves away. It's a video call, and it's Maddie's sister, Max, and she's played by Emma Graves. They talk about how Maddie's struggling with her book and she's trying to date, but there are about 4 men in the area. Max then says that she thought she saw someone move behind her, but she says she was mistaken and they say goodbye. Maddie turns off the laptop and she shakes the cat food bowl again as she wanders around the house trying to find the cat. She goes upstairs and still can't find her, and so she goes back downstairs, putting on a jacket and sitting down to open her laptop. She realises she got a message from Sarah though, and opens it to see various photos of herself in the house. The picture's clearly taken from her friend's phone from outside the house. She goes to the kitchen and looks outside to see the man with her friend's phone showing her the pictures. He goes through the door, but she races to it and locks it before he can get in. He has a crossbow and is walking around outside the house as she makes sure all the doors and windows are locked. She goes to her laptop to call 911, but the power goes out. But as her laptop was on a charge, it's still turned on, but she realises the Wi-Fi has been cut out as well, along with the power. She tries to borrow her neighbour's Wi-Fi by trying to get the password, and the whole time the man is watching her from outside, and he runs a knife along the glass, but then he suddenly leaves. Maddie goes to the window and sees the car, but the man has punctured her tyres with his knife. She looks around as the muffled sounds in her ears play, and she looks scared. She goes to a window and writes something on it, and sits down on her stairs across the room, shining a torch on the window to highlight the message. The message says she won't tell, didn't see, and her boyfriend is coming home. He takes off his mask and asks her if she can read his lips. He takes off his mask and asks her if she can read his lips. He tells her that she's seen him now, and he repeats what her sister said on the video call about her coming to live with her. He says he can come into the house anytime he likes, and asks her if she understands, getting her to nod her head. He leaves the porch as she sits there shaking and breathing heavily. And this is a point that I think I should bring up, because although Maddie does know sign language, she can lip read as well, and quite well at that. It may be a narrative choice, but it should be noted that not all deaf people are able to lip read, especially if they were deaf from birth. Maddie had plenty of time to understand speech and be able to understand what people are saying by reading their lips, but that doesn't count for everyone. Of course, certain conditions also hinder a person's ability to lip read, such as low light levels, too much hair around the mouth, or even muttering, and a person who gesticulates too much. To ensure that a deaf person can lip read what you're saying if you don't know sign language, then it's best to keep these things in mind. She goes to the kitchen and grabs a large knife, sitting against a wall as she peeks outside and tries to calm her nerves. The man appears next to her by a window, and the audience hears knocking. The man has picked up Sarah's body and is using her hand to knock at the window. Maddie starts crying, and then she remembers something about Sarah and realises that she's left her car keys behind. So she goes to get them and tries to activate the car outside. Nothing happens, and then she carefully opens the door to get a better way of activating the car. The car alarm goes off and its lights flashing and its horn beeping. She goes out through another door though to get to Sarah's body, while the man is smashing through the car window to stop the alarm. Maddie then goes back in through a window, but he rushes to her, catching sight of her out of the corner of his eye, only to be stopped as she closes the window on him. He shows her Sarah's thrown through the window, and she turns away, waiting for him to come in, and there are noises outside. She slides open a patio door and goes outside as he stalks around the house. She eventually makes a break for it, but he sees her and shoots an arrow at her. He shoots a couple but he misses, and she gets back inside. He knocks on her window as she sits down, breathing heavily and trying to regain her composure. She then runs upstairs and looks out the window, seeing him moving around outside. She goes out of a small window and onto the roof, and she carefully moves around and throws her torch into the bushes to distract him. He sees the light and goes to investigate, and she comes back inside and struggles to get back out the window. But he sees her, firing an arrow that hits her in the leg. He then starts climbing the trellis, but she knocks him down, and as he's rested his crossbow on the roof, she takes it and pulls it inside. And as he looks at her through the window, she takes out the arrows from the crossbow and trying to figure out how to use it. And as he stares at her through the window, she aims it at him. Inside, she goes into a medicine cabinet and gets a bandage and some ointment to help her wound. She wraps her ankle and does it all without trying to make a sound. And this is a point I think I should bring up, because it seems that although it's not explicitly said in the film, Maddie appears to be mute as well as deaf. The chances of Maddie losing her hearing and her ability to speak are rare, but not impossible, and probably another narrative reason. In reality, a deaf person can choose to speak if they can, and with speech therapy can even improve their speaking voice. Not all deaf people choose to speak though, finding sign language more than adequate for communication. The film's not saying that all deaf people are mute as well, but this is a common misconception. Usually because if a deaf person uses their voice, then there's a lot of stigma around that, because those less intelligent would make fun of that person. Again, a deaf person also not being able to speak is rare, but it can happen. Usually the mutism is a symptom of something else. In Maddie's case, it's more likely due to brain damage caused by meningitis. She then reloads the crossbow and tries to figure out how it works. The man sees her though, and comments that it's not so easy. Another man appears, knocking on the doors and windows to get Maddie's attention. He's calling for Sarah, who is his girlfriend. This man's name's John, and he's played by Michael Drucko. The man comes along and points the flashlight at John, pretending to be law enforcement. The man says he got a call and somebody knocked him out, taking his gun and his phone. He asks if he can use John's phone and points to it on the floor, and John hands it to him, and the man pretends to call the police station. John then notices the message on the window, and the man doesn't know what that's all about. John notices that the man is injured and he asks his phone back. The man then gives him his phone back, and John asks him about who made the call to go out there, because he says he knows that the woman in the house is deaf and she wouldn't be able to call anybody. Inside, Maddie is struggling, and outside they're talking about her. John explains how Maddie became deaf, and he starts to suspect something about the man. And then Maddie comes to the window banging on it, which distracts John. But then that is the opportunity that the man takes to stab John in the neck with his knife. And this is probably my least favourite part of the film, because Maddie has been established as an intelligent woman who lives by herself, and she's able to think about every different scenario in order to come up with a solution. However, her best solution at the moment is to slam herself against the glass and to distract John, which again gets him killed. It's not the best part, it gets the plot moving, And honestly, if you've seen other horror movies, then having a stranger come in to try and stop the killer, you know how it's going to end. They struggle on the floor, but the man subdues John and kills him. Inside, the voice of Maddie's mother is going through her head, thinking about all the things she can do to stop the man, and Maddie realises that her only option left is to kill him. The man's outside, talking to John's dead body, and wonders whether he should just go inside and finish Maddie off. Maddie's cat appears next to him, and he notices her tag with her owner's name on it, and a number. Maddie then fires an arrow through an open door and hits the man. He goes to the door, and as she locks it, and he watches her struggling in pain. She then gets up and looks him straight in the eye, as she writes on the window in her own blood. The word she writes is coward. She goes to her laptop and writes a description of him. He starts to break the glass as she finishes the note and goes to the bathroom and waits. He's behind her soon though, goading her as he lunges forward, but then she turns round and digs an arrow into his knee, and he runs off to the kitchen. He limps inside the house, and he finds her sitting on the kitchen floor, and she sprays him with some kind of chemical that you can find in any kitchen, and turns on the fire alarm, which not only makes a very loud noise, but also starts flashing lights, which disorientates him. And she also shines a torch in his face. He gets himself together though and kicks Maddie to the floor, and they struggle. She grabs for him as her heartbeat slows, and pictures of her life and her friends and family flash before her eyes. But then she grabs a corkscrew and stabs him in the neck. She gets up, takes her friend's phone from his pocket, and dials 911 and lays back. But then she gets up and she goes outside, sits on her porch with her cat, as the sirens of the police car blare out, and there's a look of relief on her face. So that's the film. And up next, I'm going to give you a more condensed idea of what I think about the film overall, and what I think it means for the non-disabled audience. Hush is a standard type of horror film that turns the concept of a lone, defenceless woman on its head. Women are so often seen as weak and helpless victims, and putting disability on top of that, Hush could have been yet another forgettable horror. However, subverting the cliches makes Hush stand out. Despite a couple of controversies, it shows a semi-realistic portrayal of a deaf woman living alone and being entirely independent, even if a lot of the text she uses seems to be an advert for Apple. Either way, Hush is a tense and suspenseful horror that puts its audience in the shoes of its protagonist, showing that she's not what they may have thought she was. Kate Siegel does a good job as the lone hero of the story, and the film is tightly paced, keeping the audience on edge as they root for Maddie's survival. Okay, so up next, let's talk about trivia. Okay, so the first thing I can tell you is that because the main character is deaf and mute, the film contains less than 15 minutes of dialogue, meaning that more than 70 minutes occur without a single word spoken. The blurb on the back of the book that Maddie wrote, Midnight Mass, references some details of the later Netflix series Midnight Mass, also by director Mike Flanagan. The main location, isolated Crockett Island, here spelt with just the one T, has a main protagonist called Riley and a church as mentioned. The main female protagonist of the series, Erin, is mentioned by Sarah, as well as Riley. Along with sharing the same director, 3 of the 5 actors in Hush also appear in Midnight Mass: Kate Siegel, Samantha Sloyan, and Michael Trucco. Midnight Mass was a long-time passion project of Mike Flanagan's, and it was also referenced in Gerald's Game, directed by Mike Flanagan and also co-starring Kate Siegel. Director Mike Flanagan didn't want the film to be pure silence, so he added various ambient sounds such as an ultrasound machine, which is the heartbeat that you hear during the movie. The film was shot in just 18 days. Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan roleplayed each scene in their house before writing it down. This enabled them to better envision how the characters would really react in a face of danger. Must have been fun in their house. William Friedkin, director of The Exorcist, was a big fan of the film and encouraged people to watch it. The main character, Maddie, and her sister Max, are named after Kate Siegel's real-life niece and nephew. And this is one of 3 horror films directed by Mike Flanagan that were released in 2016, alongside Before I Wake and Ouija, Origin of Evil. There's a quick shot of several books that the main character owns. Among them are the Stephen King novels Revival, Under the Dome, and most notably Mr. Mercedes. Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan previously worked together on Oculus as well. The film has also been remade twice in India, both released in 2019. Kolayethe Kalam in Tamil and Kamoshi in Hindi. The Stephen King book glimpsed at the beginning of the movie, as Maddie plugs in her laptop, is Mr. Mercedes, another story about a psychotic serial killer whose motives are never explained. Mike Flanagan is a huge Stephen King fan, and King was a vocal fan of Flanagan's, one who released Oculus. Shortly after Hush was released, King expressed his enthusiasm for the film on Twitter, saying, "How good is Hush? Up there with Halloween, and even more Wait Until Dark. White knuckle time." Maddie clearly doesn't know much about cars, a fact that the man is banking on when he lets the air out of her tyres. A car with 4 flat tyres can still drive just fine. It just won't have as much fine control, and the braking may still be a bit wonky. It's actually a lot like driving on very icy roads. It'll ruin the wheels and rims driving on flat tyres, but that's generally an acceptable loss to get away from a killer. Although this is not general knowledge, that most people would have known, so it makes sense that Maddie wouldn't know that either. And finally, Maddie did not have to go outside to set off her car alarm. Touching any key fob to her chin can actually turn the human skull into a functioning antennae, which will boost the intentionally weak key fob signal so it could easily travel the distance through the glass. Although most people wouldn't ever know this. Okay, that's it for this week. Next week we'll be talking about The Horse Whisperer, a romantic drama centred around a teenage girl who loses her leg in an accident, only to have the man who trains her horse to help her to heal herself as well. If you'd like to contact me, you can do so via Bluesky at bluesky.com/film-ability. You can also email me at film-ability@outlook.com. And if you'd like to make a contribution to the things that I do here, you can find me at Patreon at patreon.com/film-ability. You can also find my book at Amazon on Kindle and paperback called Film Ability, A History of Disability in Cinema. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.